Hello everyone. On behalf of Thinknyx Technologies, I would like to welcome you all for an amazing video tutorial on Linux fundamentals for beginners. Linux is an open source operating system developed by Linus Torvalds in 1991. A couple of years after its creation, it started becoming first choice for many developers across the world, and with passing time, it is one of the most used OS in industry today. Before we get started, let me introduce myself. I am Madhuri Jha, working as a technical assistant manager at Thinknyx Technologies. With more than 7 years of experience, I have delivered several trainings on DevOps and different cloud technologies. Now let's start our journey of learning by taking a glance at the agenda for today. First of all, we would be discussing why Linux, what are the basic features of Linux that has made it so popular these days. Next, we would deep dive into Linux architecture. Further in the session, we would be covering different distributions, and eventually we would be talking about which distribution to choose. Then we would be understanding the need of working on terminal. Moving forward in the session, we would be discussing some basic commands in Linux. We will walk through and see a demo of these commands. Let's understand why Linux. I'm sure you must have heard about Google, which is one of the most used search engine, and Netflix, one of the most popular OTT platform. They all run on Linux. How about terms like Docker, Kubernetes, and other high-end cloud technologies? All of them need Linux commands under the hood. I will not go too far, but our Android OS is also made on Linux kernel. So let us understand what are its features which has made it so popular. Do you know we can just download Linux from internet for free? No licensing is required, and it's open source. Linux kernel is used by several developers to customize their own operating system. More than one user can access system resources like memory, RAM, application programs at the same time. Linux can handle multiple users accessing these resources simultaneously. Linux is multitasking, that is, more than one task can be performed at same time. Like if we are playing music in VLC player and printing a document or running an application in VS Code all at the same time, this is possible in Linux in a more hassle-free way. Like any other OS, it has GUI too, which makes it user-friendly. Linux has a simple structured hierarchical file system. It contains a root directory and its subdirectories. All other directories can be accessed from the root directory. Linux is secure in comparison to other operating systems. Every program in Linux needs authorization from the administrator in the form of a password. There is no need for an antivirus to be installed. Forums by enthusiastic users are available to help and solve the problems online. Linux has a large community support that makes it robust. Portable with different architecture, be it mobile, embedded systems, camera, Linux OS is everywhere. Now let's discuss about architecture of Linux OS. In Linux architecture, the first layer is hardware, physical parts of the computer such as CPU, monitor, and other peripheral devices. Next is kernel. It is the core of any operating system. Its function is to interact with the hardware with the help of drivers and also with the user applications. Kernel is responsible for managing memory, allocating and deallocating memory, managing devices, managing system calls by different APIs, allocating resources to different tasks or processes, and several other functionalities. Shell is an environment in which user can run commands and programs. It is an interface to access and operating system services. There are two types of shells: command line and graphical shell. Command line is our popular terminal similar to CMD of Windows. Linux, we have different terminals. Bourne shell being the oldest. Later it got developed to Born Again shell, popularly called as Bash, which is default terminal in many Linux distributions, and several others like Korn shell, Z shell, C shell. Last layer is the application layer, which includes inbuilt apps like Google Chrome, VLC player, and several other apps, with utility commands like cal for calendar, cat for displaying the content of the file, and editors like vi, etc. Now let's move to our next topic, the popular distributions of Linux. Now, what's this distribution? Linux OS, Linux kernel? It's so confusing. So let me help here. The Linux which Linus Torvalds had developed was a kernel. It was not a full-fledged OS. The OS which were developed by using Linux kernel and supporting libraries were called as Linux distributions, or you can say as Linux based OS, or popularly called as Linux distros. There are three main families of Linux distributions: Debian, Red Hat Linux, SUSE Linux. Most other Linux distributions use one of these distributions as their foundation. If you talk about Debian based distros, there are many like Ubuntu, Linux Mint, Kali Linux, Deepin, Parrot OS. Ubuntu being the most used and most popular OS. Debian based OS use apt as their package manager. Red Hat Linux was a widely used commercial open source Linux distribution created by Red Hat. Later it got discontinued and then succeeded by RHEL and Fedora. Few of Red Hat based distros are RHEL, Fedora, CentOS, Rocky Linux, Oracle Linux. Package manager used in Red Hat based OS are RPM, Yum, and latest being DNF. SUSE Linux was developed from free open source Linux kernel by a German company named SUSE. It is available under two brands, OpenSUSE and SUSE Linux Enterprise. OpenSUSE is a free community distribution driven by OpenSUSE project. The package manager used in SUSE Linux is Zyper, but some distros of it also use RPM of Red Hat. This is not all. I have chosen few to mention, but there are thousands of Linux distributions. Coming to which distros to choose. Each of the distribution have some or the other functionality. Like Ubuntu is an open source used by beginners. It is easy to use with friendly GUI, extensive community support, preferred by cloud users for servers and desktop OS for personal use. Linux Mint is equally popular Ubuntu based Linux OS, preferred by music, movie and game enthusiasts. Kali Linux is another open source Debian based Linux distros best used for security tasks such as penetration testing. Red Hat Linux (RHEL) is a better option for developers. It is developed and licensed by Red Hat. It is used for commercial purposes in servers. Many businesses find that the level of support offered by Red Hat is worth investing. Fedora is another Red Hat based OS free to use. Fedora offers latest security features with stable OS. Red Hat tests and releases the features first in Fedora before making it available in RHEL. Fedora operating system is the second most commonly used distribution of Linux after Ubuntu. CentOS is another open source OS by Red Hat. So, administrators who want the RHEL OS but don't want to invest money or pay for it can use CentOS. Red Hat doesn't offer any official support for the CentOS distribution, but there is a large community support available on internet. So now it's up to you to decide which Linux distros suffice your need. So that's all we have in this video. This comprises of an introduction of understanding Linux. If you want to work on terminal and get a walkthrough on basic Linux commands with practical demonstration, then keep an eye on our Thinknyx YouTube channel. We would be releasing a video on Linux Part 2 shortly. See you there and happy learning.
Thanks for watching us. We really hope you liked our video. Please like, subscribe and also click on the link below to know more about Thinknyx. Bye. We shall see you in our next video. Stay tuned for more updates from us.